Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first of a series of videos that I will be uploading on YouTube just for the avid CPL license holder. Basically all of the videos will be for the theory component of the CPL test, and I'm going to be rushing through a few things. I suppose if you have any questions, you can just write them up on YouTube, and I'll answer them as best as I can. Other than that, I guess we should start. If you haven't seen a website called the Khan Academy, I guess this is going to be a little bit akin to that. Fairly similar. I just like his ideas, and I've watched hundreds of his videos now, Salman Khan, and he's incredible. So I'm just going to do something a little bit similar to that, just for aviation, I suppose. Great, no worries. So basically, I wanted to start with the civil aviation orders. As you can see here, the civil aviation orders is just one of our regulatory publications that we use here in Australia, and they expand on the regulations, on the civil aviation regulations. So we'll start with section 20.7.4, which is very important when it comes to the commercial pilot, and really just flying in general, even the private pilot. So if you open your publication up to that section, you'll see that it applies to aeroplanes having a maximum takeoff weight, basically up to 5,700 kilos. So it says here, not in excess of 5,700 kilos. They always like to make it incredibly confusing. They could just say anyway, we won't worry about it too much. But section 20.7.4 elaborates on the performance that the aircraft must be able to meet when taking off, landing, when going around, when we have an engine inoperative, if we're flying multi-engine aircraft. So let's just have a look at takeoff safety speed. I'll be mentioning that a fair bit. That basically it means it's the minimum speed at which the aircraft must be accelerated to in establishing the takeoff distance required. So, I mean, you probably heard all these terms before. So, if you have any dramas, as I said, just ask a question and I'll reply to it as best I can. But the section I want to start looking at is section 6, and that's the takeoff distance required. Now, we should always do a weight and balance for our flight, and then you'd fill out the appropriate the distance required section of the weight and balance, and we would find that we need to multiply our distance that we have found by 15%, or multiply by 1.15. Well, that is found in section 6.1. So we'll look at section 6.1. We would have determined our takeoff distance required from our takeoff distance chart, and we'll find here the regulation that states you must multiply by the following factors for your category or type of airplane. Now, I'm currently flying the Piper Seminole, and it weighs 1,750 kilos. So the subsection that applies to me is subsection A, 1.15 for aeroplanes with maximum takeoff weights of 2,000 kilos or less. So if your aircraft, so that's subsection A, if your aircraft weighs at or below 2,000 kilos, you must multiply your takeoff distance required that you've found by your chart by 1.15, which basically means you're adding 15%. Now, people ask, I've had people ask, why do we need to even add the 15%? What's all this about? Well, it's basically, we're not, a lot of us aren't really lucky enough to fly all the new fancy aircraft that come straight off the line. I mean, a lot of us are flying aircraft that were made in the 70s and the 80s, and unfortunately, one of the problems with that is that the aircraft actually isn't producing its rated horsepower anymore. It's the engine's getting old. There's some wear and tear within the engines. You've probably got hanger rash all over the aerofoils, all over the aircraft, which reduces the lift capability, especially when you have these problems on the wings. So it all degrades the lifting ability, or the performance rather, of the aircraft. So that's why we multiply our takeoff distance required by this 15%. It's a buffer. So there's one other thing too. To be blunt, our skills might not be as good as the test pilot. The test pilot that originally flew the aircraft in its perfect brand new condition. Not only did he have those advantages, but he's a test pilot. He's got thousands of hours, so he probably has incredible flying skills, and that 15% allows for our inabilities, maybe, but it just allows for these factors. So that's what the 15% is for. This is where you can find it. I'll write the CAOs up there. CAOs, section 20.7.4, 6.1a. I mean, if you can, if you can remember these little things, I mean, it really just proves to the testing officer that you're keen, that you want to know everything you can about flying, and where things come from, and why they're there, why these rules are in place. So that's 6.1a. We'll move on to section 7 now, and section 7 talks about the takeoff climb performance. So when you're in the takeoff configuration, you've got your landing gear extended. The aircraft must have the ability to achieve a climb gradient of 6% at the takeoff safety speed, without ground effect and with all engines operating at takeoff power. So I'm not sure what your, all the takeoff safety speeds are fairly different, but that's the runway. Oops. That's the runway, and there's your flight path. So what it's basically saying is, here's 50 feet. Here's 50 feet, and at 50 feet, you have to be able to achieve a 6% climb gradient at the takeoff safety speed, with all engines operating at takeoff power. So we're looking at that. That's 6% climb gradient. Okay. So that's basically section 7. Section 7, 6% climb gradient. All engines operating at takeoff power. Unfortunately, I'll have to end the video there because we're running out of time, but we'll go through paragraphs 8, 9 and 10 in the next video. See you then.